My parents used my college fund to send my brother to Columbia. I found out in the parking lot of a grocery store, holding a receipt for $32.19, while my mother cried into the phone and told me I was being selfish. Selfish. That was the word she used. Not betrayed, not robbed, not lied to. Selfish. Because apparently asking where the $86,000 my grandmother left me had gone was making things difficult for the family. My father took the phone from her and said very calmly, "Your brother has a real future, Claire. We had to make a practical decision." That was the exact sentence. A practical decision. As if I were a broken chair they decided not to repair. As if my future was a coupon they forgot to use before it expired. As if the money had never been mine at all. And the worst part? My brother Ethan already knew. He had known for almost a year. He was standing behind my parents when I came home that night, wearing his Columbia sweatshirt, eating takeout from the expensive Thai place my mother always said we couldn't afford. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. Like I had interrupted his dinner. Mom had set the table for 3, not 4. That was the first thing I noticed. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 cloth napkins. The same family dining room where Grandma used to sit beside me and whisper, "Don't let them shrink you, sweetheart." That night, her chair was gone. My mother had moved it into the garage. I stood in the doorway, still wearing my grocery store uniform, smelling like cardboard boxes and freezer air, and no one spoke for a few seconds. Then Dad sighed. Not a guilty sigh, an irritated one. "We were going to tell you after Ethan's orientation." I looked at him. "Tell me what?" Mom folded her hands on the table. Ethan kept eating. Dad said, "The account is gone." I laughed once because my brain didn't understand the sentence. What account? Nobody answered quickly enough, and that silence told me everything. Grandma's account. The one she had created when I was 12. The one she made my parents promise would only be used for my education. The one she talked about in the hospital when she held my hand and said, "This is your way out if they ever forget what you're worth." They had emptied it. For Ethan. For his tuition, his dorm, his meal plan, his new laptop, his networking expenses. I remember staring at my brother's sweatshirt like the letters themselves had been stitched out of my future. Columbia. White letters across navy blue cotton. Paid for by a dead woman who never trusted him. I asked, "How much?" Mom looked down. Dad said, "That's not helpful." "How much?" Ethan dropped his fork. "Oh my God, Claire. Can you not make everything about money?" That was when something inside me went quiet. Not calm. Quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before a door locks forever. I looked at him and said, "It was my money." He leaned back. "It was family money." "No," I said. "It was mine." Dad's face hardened. "You're 26 years old. You work at a grocery store. Ethan got into an Ivy League school. We made a choice that gave this family the best chance." This family. That phrase had always meant everyone except me. I paid my own rent. I bought my own groceries. I covered Mom's prescriptions twice when Dad's hours were cut. I picked Ethan up from parties when he was too drunk to stand. I missed interviews because Mom needed rides. I worked double shifts while Ethan posted photos from campus with captions like, "Hard work pays off." Hard work. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked one question. Did Grandma know? My mother flinched. Just a little, but I saw it. Dad answered too fast. She trusted us. That was not an answer. I looked at my mother. Did Grandma know? Her lips trembled. Claire, your grandmother loved all of you. All of us, I said, but she left that money to me. Ethan stood up then. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. You weren't going to do anything with it. Be honest. You've been talking about going back to school for years. I stared at him. I couldn't go because I was helping here. He smiled. Not wide, just enough. That was your choice. And there it was. The whole family philosophy in 3 words. Their needs were sacrifices. My sacrifices were choices. My father pointed toward the hallway. You need to calm down. I said, I want the bank statements. Dad's face changed. It was fast, but not fast enough. Fear. Not guilt. Fear. He said, there's no reason to dig through old paperwork. That money was in my name. Mom whispered, it was a custodial account. I looked at her. You said it was protected. She started crying harder. Ethan rolled his eyes. Dad stood up and put both hands flat on the table. Enough! We did what was necessary. Ethan has a chance to become someone. You can still figure things out. Become someone. I had been standing there the whole time. Apparently, I was no one. That night, I packed my things from the room they still called Claire's room, even though I hadn't lived there for years. It was mostly storage now. Christmas decorations, old curtains, a broken treadmill. My mother followed me upstairs and stood in the doorway while I took Grandma's photograph from the dresser. She looked smaller than usual. Not sorry, just afraid of consequences. Claire, she said softly, please don't punish your brother for our decision. I put the photo in my bag. You mean your theft? Her face twisted. Don't say that. What should I call it? She wiped her cheek. We were desperate. For what? She didn't answer. I turned around. For what, Mom? She glanced toward the stairs, where Dad and Ethan were still arguing in low voices. Then she said something I didn't understand at the time. Your father had already made promises. I stopped packing. What promises? She shook her head immediately. Nothing. Forget I said that. But I didn't forget. That sentence stayed in my head the entire drive home. Your father had already made promises. Not we wanted to help Ethan. Not tuition was expensive. Promises. To whom? For what? I went back to my apartment, sat on the floor beside my bed, and opened Grandma's old photo album. I don't know why. Maybe because when your own parents erase you, you need proof that someone once saw you clearly. There was a picture of Grandma and me at my high school graduation. She was wearing her pale blue suit, the one with pearl buttons. Her arm was around me, and she was looking at me like I was the miracle in the room. On the back, in her handwriting, she had written, "For Claire, the one who listens." I turned the photo over and over until my fingers hurt. Then I noticed something. Behind the photo, tucked into the plastic sleeve, there was a folded piece of paper. I had looked through that album 100 times and never seen it. My hands went cold before I even opened it. It was a bank deposit receipt. Grandma's name, my name, and an amount. $86,000. But underneath, written in blue ink, was a note. Claire, if they ever tell you this money is gone, ask for the January statement. Not the final balance. The January statement. I read it 3 times, then 4. The January statement. Grandma had known. Or at least she had suspected. I didn't sleep that night. At 6 in the morning, I called the bank. The woman on the phone was polite until I gave my name and asked about the account. Then her voice changed into that careful tone people use when they are legally not allowed to say what they want to say. "I'm sorry, Miss Harper, but that account was closed." "When?" There was a pause. "Approximately 11 months ago." "By whom?" "I'm not able to disclose details over the phone without verification." "I can come in." Another pause. "Yes," she said. "That would be best." I asked, "Can I request the January statement?" This time the pause was longer. Then she said very quietly, "Please bring identification." The bank was 20 minutes from my apartment. I called in sick for my shift, which I almost never did. My manager, Luis, heard my voice and didn't ask questions. "Take the day," he said. At the bank, they put me in a glass office with a woman named Ms. Alvarez. She looked about 50 with silver glasses and the kind of calm expression that made me trust her immediately. She checked my ID, then she looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Miss Harper," she said, "before I print anything, I need to ask, are you currently represented by an attorney?" My stomach dropped. "No. Should I be?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she printed 3 documents. The first showed the account balance in January, $86,000. The second showed several withdrawals. Not one, several. Over 4 months. The third showed a transfer I didn't recognize. $22,500. Not to Columbia. Not to a tuition office. Not to a dormitory account. To a company called Halden Ridge Consulting. I stared at the name. "What is this?" Ms. Alvarez folded her hands. "I can't interpret the transactions for you." "Was this authorized?" She looked at me for a long moment. "The account required guardian authorization before your 21st birthday. After that, withdrawals required your consent unless legal power of attorney existed." I blinked. "I never signed anything." She gently pushed 1 page forward. "There is a signature authorization form on file." My name was at the bottom. Claire Harper. except I hadn't signed it. The signature was close, very close, but the C was wrong. I knew instantly who had done it. Not because I had proof, because I had spent 26 years watching Ethan copy my handwriting on birthday cards he forgot to buy until the last minute. I felt my hands start to shake. Ms. Alvarez noticed. "There's another issue," she said. I looked up. "Another?" She turned the paper around. The power of attorney document was notarized by a family acquaintance, Leonard Price. Leonard Price. My father's best friend. A man who came to every barbecue, a man who always told me, "Your brother is going places." A man who, apparently, helped them steal from me. I left the bank with a folder pressed to my chest and a feeling I couldn't name. Not anger. Anger is hot. This was cold, clean, precise. For the first time, I didn't want an apology. I wanted records. That afternoon, my mother called 12 times. Dad called twice. Ethan sent one text. "You need to stop embarrassing Mom." I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the public library because my apartment internet was terrible. And I searched Halden Ridge Consulting. At first, nothing useful came up. A basic website, no real staff page, no office photos, just polished phrases. Strategic education placement, legacy admissions consulting, private family advisory. Then I found a state business registration, owner Leonard Price. My father's friend, the notary, the man tied to the fake document. I sat in the library staring at the screen while a teenager beside me played a game with the volume too high. Halden Ridge Consulting wasn't some random company. It was Leonard. And my parents had transferred $22,500 of my college fund to him. For what? To help Ethan get into Columbia? To hide something? To pay someone back? Your father had already made promises. I printed everything. The librarian gave me a look when the machine kept spitting out pages. "Research project?" she asked. I almost laughed. Something like that. By sunset, I had a folder full of bank statements, business records, and enough questions to make my chest feel tight. I should have gone home. Instead, I drove to my parents' house. Not to confront them. Not yet. I don't know why I went. Maybe because some stupid part of me still wanted them to look me in the eye and say, "We're sorry. We panicked. We made a terrible mistake." They didn't. When I arrived, there were cars in the driveway. Too many. Inside, I heard laughter. The front door was unlocked. I stepped into the foyer and saw silver balloons tied to the stair railing. Blue and white. Columbia colors. A cake sat on the dining room table. "Congratulations, Ethan." My parents were throwing him a send-off party. With my money. My Aunt Melissa was there. 2 cousins, Leonard Price, and Ethan, standing near the fireplace holding a glass of champagne. He saw me first. His smile faded. Mom turned and froze. Dad's jaw tightened. For 1 second, everyone looked confused, like I was a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. Then my aunt said, "Claire! We didn't know you were coming." Of course they didn't. There were only enough chairs for people they were proud of. Mom hurried toward me. "This isn't a good time." I looked past her at Leonard. He looked perfectly relaxed. That told me he didn't think I knew. I held up the folder. I got the January statement. The room went silent. Not uncomfortable silent. Terrified silent. Dad stepped forward. "Claire, kitchen. Now." I didn't move. Ethan muttered, "Are you serious?" I looked at him. "Did you forge my signature?" His face went red instantly. That was my answer. Aunt Melissa said, "What is she talking about?" Mom whispered, "Claire, please." I opened the folder and took out the authorization form. My name is on a document I never signed. Leonard notarized it. Money was transferred from my account to his company, and somehow my brother's Ivy League dream got paid for. Leonard set down his drink. Slowly. Dad's voice dropped. "You have no idea what you're accusing people of." "You're right," I said. "That's why I'm going to find out." Ethan laughed sharply. "You're going to ruin my life because you're bitter?" I looked at him in his Columbia sweatshirt. "No. I'm going to tell the truth and see whose life can survive it." That was the moment Leonard finally spoke. "Claire, sometimes families make financial arrangements that look complicated from the outside." I turned to him. "You notarized a forged signature." His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. "I would be careful with that word." "Forged?" "With accusations." Dad stepped closer. "You need to leave." I looked around the room, at the balloons, at the cake, at the relatives who had praised Ethan for years while I worked late shifts and convinced myself being overlooked was the same as being strong. Then I said, "No." My father blinked. "No?" "No," I said. "For once, I'm not leaving quietly." Mom covered her mouth. Ethan slammed his glass down. "You always do this. You make everything dramatic." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You stole my future, threw a party with the money, and I'm dramatic?" Aunt Melissa stood up. "Wait, stole what money?" Dad snapped, "Melissa, stay out of this." But it was too late. The room had shifted. People weren't looking at me like I was unstable anymore. They were looking at him. That's when my mother broke. She sat down hard in Grandma's old chair. The chair I thought had been moved to the garage. Apparently, it had only been removed when I was expected. She looked at Dad and said, "Tell her." Dad whipped around. "Don't." Mom's voice cracked. "She already knows enough." "Marianne," Leonard warned. But my mother was staring at me now. And for the first time in my life, she looked less like my mother and more like a woman who had been holding her breath for years. "Ethan didn't just need tuition," she whispered. Ethan's face went pale. Dad said, "Stop talking." Mom kept going. "He didn't get into Columbia the way we said." The room went completely still. My brother looked at the floor. I looked at him. "What does that mean?" Nobody answered. Then my Aunt Melissa said quietly, "Marianne, What did you do? My mother started crying again, but this time I didn't feel sorry for her. Dad reached for her arm. She pulled away. We paid Leonard, she said, to fix it. I stared at Leonard. Fix what? Leonard's calm mask was gone now. He looked at Dad, not me. You said she'd never pursue this. And there it was. The sentence that told me everything. They had not made one desperate mistake. They had built a plan around the belief that I would stay small. That I would cry, take the damage, and disappear. Just like always. My father looked at me with pure anger, not because he was ashamed, because I had failed to play my role. I picked up the authorization form and slid it back into the folder. Then I said, I'm going to ask you one time. Dad said nothing. I looked at all four of them, my mother, my father, my brother, Leonard Price. What exactly did you buy with my money? No one answered. But Ethan did something worse. He smiled. A small, desperate, ugly smile. And he said, You can't prove any of it. That was the wrong thing to say. Because what Ethan didn't know was that Grandma had left me more than a warning in that photo album. There was another envelope, one I hadn't opened yet. And on the front, in her careful blue handwriting, were 6 words. If they lie, call this lawyer. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger had already burned itself out. What kept me awake was Ethan's smile. You can't prove any of it. The confidence in his voice, the certainty, the way he looked at me as if the story was already over, as if I had lost before I even started. By 3 a.m, Grandma's envelope was sitting on my kitchen table. I must have picked it up 10 times before finally opening it. Inside was a business card. Nothing more. No explanation, no letter, no dramatic revelation. Just a name. Margaret Sloan, attorney at law. And written beneath it in Grandma's handwriting, she knows everything. My heart started pounding. Everything? What exactly did Grandma know? At 9 o'clock sharp, I called the number. A receptionist answered. When I gave my name, something strange happened. The woman immediately stopped sounding like a receptionist. Ms. Harper? Yes. Please hold. Less than 10 seconds later, another voice came on. Older, calm, professional. Claire? I froze. You know who I am? I've been expecting your call for several years. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Several years. Not days. Not weeks. Years. Margaret continued. Your grandmother hired me shortly before her death. Every nerve in my body went tight. Why? There was silence. Then, because she believed someone in your family would eventually steal from you. I nearly dropped the phone. Not because I was surprised, because hearing another person say it out loud made it real. Margaret asked, Can you come to my office today? Yes. Bring every document you have. I will. And Claire? Yes? Your grandmother was many things. A pause. She was rarely wrong. Margaret Sloane's office occupied the third floor of an old brick building downtown. No marble lobby, no luxury furniture, no giant law firm logo, just quiet confidence, the kind that comes from winning. She was in her 70s, silver hair, sharp eyes, the type of woman who looked like she could spot a lie before someone finished telling it. I handed her the folder. She spent 20 minutes reviewing everything. No expressions, no reactions, nothing. Then she closed the folder. Well, that one word somehow sounded devastating. What? She leaned back. Your family is in trouble. I stared at her. Because of the forged signature? She shook her head. That's the least of their problems. The least? I felt my stomach drop. Margaret opened a drawer and removed another folder. This one was much thicker. She slid it across the desk. Your grandmother prepared this before she died. I opened it. The first page was a copy of her will. The second was a list of account numbers. The third was a handwritten statement. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Claire, if you are reading this, then the thing I feared has happened. Your parents chose Ethan again. I had to stop reading for a second. My vision blurred. Margaret waited quietly. I continued. I love your brother, but he was never taught consequences. And your parents spent years sacrificing your future to protect him from his. If they take your education fund, look deeper. The money itself was never the real problem. I looked up. What does that mean? Margaret folded her hands. It means your grandmother discovered something 6 months before she died. My pulse quickened. What? She discovered your father had been secretly borrowing money. I blinked. Borrowing? Margaret nodded. Large amounts. From who? Everyone. The room suddenly felt smaller. Credit lines, private lenders, family members, friends. I stared at her. My dad wasn't rich. No. He barely made enough to support us. Margaret gave me a long look. Exactly. A horrible feeling started forming in my chest. You think Ethan's tuition wasn't the reason? Margaret didn't answer immediately. Then she slid another document toward me. A debt summary. My father's name. Total outstanding liabilities, $312,000. I felt physically sick. $312,000. How? Margaret's expression hardened. Your father spent years trying to create opportunities for Ethan. I understood instantly. Private schools, tutors, sports programs, admissions consultants, networking events, everything. Everything had been built around Ethan. Everything. And someone had paid for it. The answer was sitting right in front of me. My father. And eventually, me. Margaret pointed to one transaction. $22,500. Halden Ridge Consulting. Leonard Price. He wasn't hired to help Ethan. I frowned. Then why? He was hired to hide financial records. For a moment, I honestly couldn't process the sentence. Then everything clicked. The transfers, the fake signature, the panic, the lies, the desperate party. This had never been about tuition. Tuition was just the excuse. They had been drowning for years. And when the bills finally came due, they grabbed the only money left. Mine. 3 days later, Margaret filed everything. Fraud investigation, forgery complaint, civil recovery action. Every document, every statement, every transfer, every signature, every lie. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Ethan, nobody. Then I waited. For the first time in my life, I stopped reacting. I started preparing. And that changed everything. The first domino fell 10 days later. Columbia contacted Ethan. Someone had reported irregularities connected to parts of his admissions package. Not enough to immediately expel him. Enough to investigate. Panic exploded inside my family. My phone filled with messages. Dad, call me. Mom, please don't do this. Ethan, what the hell have you done? I ignored them all, because for the first time, they were experiencing uncertainty, the same uncertainty I had lived with for years. Then Leonard cracked. Not publicly. Privately. Margaret called me. Leonard wants to cooperate. I almost laughed. Of course he did. People like Leonard are loyal until prison enters the conversation. Then they become very honest. We met in a conference room. He looked 10 years older. No confidence, no polished smile. Nothing. Just fear. Margaret placed a recorder on the table. Start talking. And he did. Everything. Every detail. Every payment. Every document. Every conversation. 2 hours. 2 straight hours. My father had asked him to create consulting invoices, fake educational expenses, fake consulting agreements, fake justifications, anything necessary to move money. I sat there listening to my family's secrets unravel one layer at a time. At some point, I stopped feeling angry. It was almost worse than anger. Disappointment. Because every new truth made them smaller. Then came Thanksgiving, the first family gathering since everything exploded. I almost didn't go. Margaret thought I should. Why? She smiled. Because truth deserves witnesses. So I went. The atmosphere was awful. Nobody knew where to look. My Aunt Melissa barely spoke. My cousins whispered. My mother looked exhausted. My father looked older. And Ethan looked scared. For the first time in his life, scared. Halfway through dinner, my father stood, glass in hand. Everyone became quiet. He cleared his throat and said, I owe someone an apology. The room froze, not because of the words, because nobody had ever heard him say them. Ever. He looked directly at me. Then something happened I never expected. He started crying. Not dramatic crying, real crying. The kind people do when they finally stop defending themselves. I failed you. Silence. I kept telling myself I was helping Ethan. His voice broke. But every time I helped him, I took something from you. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I convinced myself I'd pay it back. Another pause. I never did. Mom started crying too. Then my father said something that changed everything. I was wrong. Simple. 4 words. 20 years late. But real. And somehow that mattered. A month later, the civil case ended. The money was returned. Every dollar. Plus interest, plus penalties. The court didn't care about family excuses. Numbers are honest. People aren't. The final amount was just over $127,000. Enough to change my life. Enough to finally do what Grandma wanted. Go back to school. But that's not the ending. The ending came 6 months later. I was walking across a university campus carrying a backpack full of textbooks. 30 years old. Older than most students. Terrified. Excited. Free. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. Just a photo. Nothing else. I opened it. It was Grandma's chair. The same chair from the dining room. The one that always disappeared when I was around. The chair now sat in my parents' front room. On the seat was a framed picture of Grandma and me. Underneath it was a small plaque. 6 words. For Claire, the one who listens. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then another message arrived. This one from Dad. 3 sentences. Your grandmother was right. We should have listened to you. I'm sorry. I read it twice, then put the phone away. Because forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing. Some bridges can be rebuilt. Others become lessons. And maybe that's what karma really is. Not revenge, not punishment. Just the moment when truth finally arrives. And nobody can run from it anymore.